At the start of this year, how I started to draw and design shifted a little bit. Been drawing in vector, using Illustrator more than usual, and found a nice little comfort zone to build off of doing more clean vector mascot style character art. And as the months have gone by, I feel like I've been getting pretty good at it. Been also playing with type and feel like I've gotten to the point where I can recreate certain logos, which is a power I should not have. My main influence has been artists and designers that popped up from the Y2K boom, mainly present around the late 90s and early 2000s, which you may be vaguely familiar with depending on where you were in the game and music scene around that time. Been learning from the likes of the designer Republic, who was responsible for the iconic logos and designs seen in the Wipeout series, but also the designers who have still been trying to keep the spirit alive today, such as Froyotam and Nat King. This video isn't much of a tutorial or anything like that, similar to the other art-related videos I've put on this channel, but more of a little look into my process of how I've been creating some of my recent work. I mentioned this is not really a tutorial because part of me feels like my workflow is so different compared to others to the point where I feel like I'm doing it wrong. But it works for me, and the final pieces look good, and that's all that matters.
It's beautiful.
I'm not going to do a commentary or record myself doing a design, but instead I'm going to break down a piece into steps from the sketch to the final work. To keep it on a somewhat simple note while still showing all the techniques and tools I use, I'm going to be using this icon I made a while ago for the VTuber duo of Rummy and Koki, since they're almost at 1K, and you can enjoy quality entertainment such as this. I started by sketching in a traditional art program, mainly Clip Studio Paint. For a clean look, I usually tend to keep the designs I make on the more symmetrical side, cleaning up the sketch often so I have a clear idea of where everything should be when I render it in vector, and putting any other element that isn't symmetrical, such as the break in the hair, the tag on the hoodie, and the straw in the eye, on a different layer. With all of the setup out of the way, I can now pop it into Illustrator and get right to rendering the outlines. I do this by using the pen tool for certain spots as well as the shape tool. If you watch my video on how I make Paper Mario style characters, this step is going to seem a bit familiar to you. I usually tend to use shapes when outlining and adjust them for the cleanest and smoothest look possible. Maybe scaling them, stretching, squashing, adjusting corners, or using effects. This is because the pen tool can only take me so far sometimes, and I absolutely don't trust the pencil tool, drawing tablet on hand or not. I also don't really use pointed ends or edges in my shapes and lines, and just keep them a bit more rounded as well. To keep things consistent, I also use two different line weights, a thick one for the main shapes, and one about 2 points or so smaller for details, such as the teeth. The end result usually looks like this. It'll all make sense in a second, I swear. After aligning the main stuff and making sure everything is in its proper place and stroke size, I copy the artboard and move it somewhere else, just in case, as a little backup. And then expand the shape, turning the outlines into solid objects, and use the knife tool to cut off all the excess until it's a nice and clean outline. If you look back at the final art I showed you earlier, you may have noticed that the outline completely surrounding the shape is just a tiny bit bolder, as well as a slightly colored outline. To do this, just copy the current outlines and use Pathfinder to combine it all into one shape. And a few anchor points chopped off later, we have a solid shape we can now turn into a stroke, align it with the outline, and there you go. Do it again, add a color, and now you have a little colored outline. It's a very minor detail, but I feel like it makes the overall work bolder and stick out a bit more. Gives it a little character. Coloring is simple, and the easiest part of the whole project. Just slap together some shapes using the pen tool, and arrange everything behind the outlines. But I'm sure you're wondering about this little screen tone effect. When I first started incorporating this, I originally overthought it way too much, making a giant grid of individual dots and making my computer on the verge of causing another Chernobyl trying to move over hundreds of objects at a time. I mainly use a screen tone effect inside objects in place of just going with a hard black or gray, to not get in the way of the outlines or just put it over colored areas for a shading effect. But doing a screen tone effect is actually a lot simpler than you think, especially compared to my initial thoughts. Make a small dot, open the pattern tool, put it in some shapes, put it behind the outlines or whatever you need shaded, and you're set. After making sure everything is aligned and in place, which for a perfectionist like me is either a very simple or infuriating process, and adding some flair or type, that's a finished design. Doing projects like these recently has been very fun, and in some cases, kinda relaxing? I don't know, it's always just nice to see these come together, let alone beginning to nail a style I've wanted to use in my own work for years now. Links are in the description if you want to see more of my work, and as always, thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.